Well, guys, we are up and going. Getting this thing started. We are starting off with a little catfish discussion. It was good yesterday. If you didn't see it, if you're into catfishing, you're definitely going to learn a thing or two. So, yeah, guys, if you've got any questions, drop them in the comments. We're here at the Alabama Fishing Show and Expo. Opened at 10. We're going till 7. We're going to be streaming seminars all day. Got Matt Herron and Wes Logan, I know, on the agenda. So a lot of bass stuff coming up. I think this is the only non-bass, but yeah. But yeah, come on down. There's a bunch of good stuff here at the venue. So without further ado, I'm gonna swap the camera around, and I think they're gonna get started here in just a second.
Hey, welcome everybody here Saturday morning, Alabama Fishing Expo. I'm Mike Gaston. I host all the seminars and actually do some as well. Right now, you guys are catfishermen. Stacey, Gaston, Aaron Churchwell. They are the kings of catching giant catfish. When I grew up, I want to be these guys. I bass fish for a living, and their fish eat my fish. So they're going to teach you how to catch some giant catfish. Pay attention to what they're going to tell you, and you'll be as good as them someday. Take it away.
Yes, sir. Hey, listen, my name is Stacey Gaston. This is Aaron Churchwell. Glad to have y'all in here with us this afternoon, this morning. There's a couple of things I'm just wanting to do a little bit different today than we done yesterday. I do want to say that tomorrow Aaron will be back in here by himself doing a seminar tomorrow afternoon. But this morning I want to open the floor up. I want to do a little bit something different and just get in here going through a speech and telling you, hey, this is what I do, hey, this is how I do it, and we probably may get into that. But what I want to do is, if there is something particular, hey, that you're having questions about, that what I need to do, what kind of tips and techniques do you use for this, what do you look for? I want to be able to open that up to you. It took us, probably me and him both. I mean, I don't know if y'all keep up with Aaron Churchwell, and I know you might have seen me on Facebook or YouTube or something, and around the catfishing industry and tournament fishing. What we learn, or what I've learned, it took me years to be able to learn what I have, you know, and a lot of trial and error, a lot of error, you know, a lot of it.
A lot of trips not catching fish.
A lot of trips not catching fish. You know, a lot of times you see us out fishing, you see us when we go live, and you're like, man, these guys are smoking them. They catching some giants. Let me tell you what you don't see. Is all them trips that we go out that you never see a video, we out there fishing. We just didn't catch nothing to do a video with. But we have, the Lord has blessed us that I've been able to put some giant catfish in the boat and do it not every trip, but what I would consider pretty consistent, you know. And I'm talking about something 30 or 40 pounds. So there's some things that I do, and there's some principles in which I go by that I use to be able to try to consistently do that, you know, pretty consistently. If you go fish in a tournament and you're fishing in a tournament and they allow you 3 fish to weigh in, I want to tell you, you need to have 3 big fish, because going to a tournament and pulling out 3 fish that weighs 5 pounds is not going to win a Catmaster. It's not going to win a Cabela's unless you're the only one in it. Somebody is catching big fish. So the mentality in tournament fishing is, the majority of the rules is you can have what they call 2 overs. And 2 overs is what they refer to as 2 fish over 32 inches.
34.
and one under 32 inches. Ain't 32 right?
34.
34 inches.
Every state's different. So every state has different regulations. These regulations are set by DNR. So like Tennessee used to be 36 inches. Now it's 34. Alabama's 34. Alabama actually started the 34-inch rule to protect those bigger fish. Those bigger fish are our brood fish. That's the ones that lay the more eggs. They have the DNA to get that big. It's the same thing with humans. Not every human can get, I'm never gonna weigh 300 pounds unless I have a drastic change to something with my body. I don't have the DNA to get that big. It's the same thing with fish. Fish are not every fish can grow to 100 pounds.
So we do have that 34-inch limit. So when you go to go the tournament, hey, we need 2 really big ones. Then we need one that's gonna be what they call, we need a really big little one. You know, the biggest we can get to 34 inches without going over, because if we have 3 that's over this, then we're disqualified. So the secret is catching 2 big fish in a tournament to be up there. And I want to tell y'all, if you're familiar with this, if you go to a weigh-in, these guys is weighing in fish, 3 fish, gonna be, to get in the money, you're gonna have to have over 100 pounds of fish with 3 of them. And that's 2 big ones and a little one. So you can see the mentality when we go out. Hey, you know what the key thing is today is not how many we can catch. And I go out with this mentality good morning, that when I'm fishing, we don't have to really catch but 3 fish today. That's what we're after. We just need the 3 right fish, the 2 real big ones. Anybody here got a specific question you want to ask?
Does the noodling mess up the spawn?
So it does. I don't want to say noodling, or I don't want to see it go away, because that's something that's in our history. But yes, you're pulling a fish off of a nest. That fish is in there protecting its eggs, protecting the fry. So when you pull it out of there, even if you put him back in there, there's no telling that he's going to stay there. So, there's still probably a survivability rate of those, but, to each their own, though.
Anybody else got a question?
Fishing a new body of water, and then what's the areas you look for your bigger fish, not your ordinary fishing of that?
The question that he asked is, when fishing a new body of water, what do we look for them big fish? Is that correct? Yes. This is where I would tell you to start at. I would say this would be, to me, it is something that's a little bit more consistent, that it's proved to work over and over again. I'm not saying it's a fix-all, but it is something that has been fairly consistent with me. And I go back to 2 things, is ledges. I really like ledges. I want to be out on a ledge. So, and what I mean by a ledge is when you have your map cards, if you have a map on your unit. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Humminbird Lake Master or Navionics cards, but you can buy a Lake Master or a Navionics card to put in. I run a Humminbird Helix 12 and 15, or whichever one you decide. You can buy a card that you can put in this unit, and it is connected to GPS. And so when I look at my map, some of y'all drove up here today. Have y'all ever used your phone for directions? Well, on my unit, it's just like that, but I'm on the water. And it shows where every little creek channel comes in. It shows to where the major river channel flowed at. It shows all of that. So I'm able now to position my boat right on a creek channel. So if we're on a lake like Wheeler Lake that's 2 miles wide, and let's say a creek coming in from way over there, and the regular original river channel's over here, you're wanting to know, where's that creek channel come into this original river? Because there's two miles of water right here. If I got this card in my boat, I got GPS in it, I can put my boat right on that intersection. Do you see what I mean? So I know that. And so I try to fish them ledges where you go and say from 10 foot of water, dropping off into 40 foot of water. I think, I'm not saying it's a fix-all, but it has held consistent with me to look for them ledges like this. I think that it's one reason it holds fish that I am fishing in a spot that this fish has the access to move up into a flat. He also has the access to move back down into deep water, and it's all here within several hundred feet of him. And as the old folks say, and I don't know if they ain't true about this, I just seem to believe that maybe when these fish are traveling, they traveling on a corridor, you know, and maybe that old river bank that used to be there, that ledge, is what they're following. I do not know that for sure, but I do know it seems like that ledge has produced better quality fish for me. That's where I was starting to look at. You want to share a little bit on this?
So that, we consider that to be structure, a ledge in a lake or in a river or something like that. So when we say structure, that to us is a broad term. To you guys, it may not be. When we say structure, you may be thinking about a tree or a rock pile or something like that. Any of those pieces of structure is where I tend to start. Because, I mean, a catfish is it's a fish of habit. And that's where it's comfortable. That's where it feels comfortable. So when you've got big condition changes, big barometric swings, stuff like that, that's where them fish are gonna go. They're gonna go to that structure, they can bury up down in that stuff, and they feel safe. You ever went to a Cabela's or a Bass Pro?
Come on in here. Hold on just a minute. Y'all come on in and sit down? Maybe not. Go ahead.
If you ever went to a Cabela's or a Bass Pro and you've got a big temperature or condition change, you got a cold front rolling in or something like that, you walk in there and you look in the tank, right? All those fish, you'll look at crappie and they'll be nosed up to a tree. You'll see the catfish in there, they'll be laying slap on the bottom in between rocks, behind logs, stuff like that. I think all fish are the same with that. I think when you have something change that much on them, I think that's what their comfort zone is. Whether it be a bass, crappie, brim, catfish, I think they all kind of tend to do the same.
Let me go back to this. I'm just going to share this story. A couple months ago, a guy had called me. He fishes back home. Been fishing on this body of water. He told me, hey, I've been fishing here a long time. And I say several years that he had bought this place on the river, but never caught a big fish, never caught nothing of any size. And I say big, I'm talking about 20, 30, 40 pound plus. And he asked me, because he see where I catch them, and he asked me, he said, what do you do different? And I said, I don't know where you fish, I don't know what you're doing, but I went back to this. I said, why don't you go out to that ledge? Move out to the ledge. He was dragging baits. If anybody's familiar with the term dragging baits, it's where we're putting out rods and baits and we're laying them on the bottom and we're actually trolling for catfish. I said, go out to this ledge and troll that ledge. And as you go up that ledge, within 2 weeks, he had messaged me 2 fish that he had done caught, and one of them was over 30 pounds, the other one was like close to 50. He said, I've never done this, and this happened by him just changing locations. Let me share one other thought with the guys who was looking to put bigger fish in your boat. So, and I was fishing with a guy. He'd never caught anything over 12 pounds, fished all his life. He come with me, he said, I've never caught a fish over 12 pounds, been on this river all my life. And I said, well, where do you fish at? And he went to saying this, and other. He said, I would think that it would be right here. Now, this is what I told him, and I'm not trying to be sarcastic, okay? But he asked me the question, how do I catch bigger fish? I've never caught one over 12 pounds, and yet I've been fishing here for the last 20 years. And I said, well, where have you been fishing? He pointed out, he said, I think that would be a good spot. And this is what I told him. I said, fish somewhere opposite of what you would think would be a good spot. And to me, it would make sense that I've never caught one over this big. I've fished here for 20 years. Evidently, what I'm thinking is a good spot is not a good spot. I said, so just go to the other end of the spectrum. But anyway, over time, I says, move out and start doing this. He said, well, we've always fished like this. This is the way Granddaddy done it. This is the way my daddy done it. Did they ever catch big fish? No, but they would catch a lot of squealers. I said, well, you can go back over there and fish for them, but if we're going to catch big fish, let's move out and do something different than you've been doing. I'm going to say that we are, maybe this terminology, we are creatures of habit. We creatures of habit. Because you get in the boat, we went to fishing today, you would get in here and so we go down the river and say, hey, we need to stop at that hole right there. My granddad and them all used to, he caught a real big one right there 20 years ago. Stop there. And we go that same place every time, don't we? And you know what we do? We go there, me and my buddy, we're going to go down here, we sit up and anchor up, and we sit there and talk about it. My granddaddy caught a real big one right there in that hole right there 20 years ago. And the next trip we go back to that same place. My granddaddy caught a real big one right there 20 years ago. Sit there and fish on it every time. I'm like, when's the last time you caught a big one? I said, I ain't never caught nothing here, but my granddaddy caught. We have this habit of going back to the same place all the time and it not producing. One of the things that we have determined, these fish are moving. Now I'm going to go back to this thought. Y'all remember what I was telling you about that ledge? Fishing on a ledge? When fishing on that ledge, we run things called planer boards. Y'all don't know if y'all familiar with this. Planer boards, when I'm trolling for fish, I can take a planer board if I'm fishing with 6 rods, which most of the time in a tournament that we're allowed to fish with. I can put a planer board on one of my rods and I can clip it onto my line, and it's designed, if my boat is sitting right here, I can drop it in the water and let it go out and lock it in, and it's designed to run my bait 100 feet out there if I wanted to. So I got one line that's sitting over there, let's say 50 feet. Do the next one to the far right. And we got another line sitting over there 50 feet. 50 feet, 100 feet, 50 feet. We got a 100-foot span. I take another one and put a planer board on it and cut the distance in half and put 2 right behind the boat. So I don't have to get right on top of that fish. I just got to get within 100 feet of him. Do you see what I mean? Now watch this too. As I'm on that ledge coming up and down through there, you ever notice this? And I'm bad about this. I have a partner fishing with me. He'll tell you, I'm on that ledge and I'm having all of my baits is over here in this 30, 40, 50 foot. All of his baits is over here in this 30, 20, 10. I'm telling you, he catch 2 fish, I'm slipping that boat over a little bit. Because you know what it told me? It told me that he's done caught 3 fish to my 0. You know what that told me? Somebody said, well, he's a better fisherman than you. Well, I don't know. But what I do know is the fish is up on that ledge and they're not down here in this 50 foot of water. So what am I going to do? I'm going to move my boat now up. That no longer now have we got 3 baits in this depth of water. We're fixing to increase our chances because I got 6 baits in this depth of water. Does that make sense? And the same thing, when we fish in a tournament and I done caught 2 or 3 out here in this 40 and 50 foot of water, I'm fixing to take my trolling motor and I'm fixing to ease us over. Because I need his baits now to be over here where I'm at also. Seems like to me, 6 baits where they bite and beats 3 baits where they bite. Do you see what I mean? And I have a better chance at doing that. It's just an idea, just a tip and technique. Some people drag and just stay on that certain line. I have a bad habit. If I'm not catching anything, if you're looking on that slope, I'll weave in and out of it. And I'll go out and pull my baits out into the deep water, and I'll pull back and pull them back up the ledge and pull them back up on that flat. I'm trying to find out where these fish at that are biting. Does that make sense? And once we target that, we just caught 2 right here. I'm fixing to take that boat and go straight parallel with this. I'm like, we need to keep our baits in this depth of water. Now, one more thing, I want to make you aware of this. And don't go on and on and on for the next 3 hours and don't catch anything and never move. Because I believe, especially in the summertime, if we happen to be catching these fish in 10 foot of water, and we done pretty good for the first hour or 2, and the sun starts to pop up, and now we're not catching anything, and people, when we say, well, they quit biting. Well, on my graph, I can look and I'm like, I don't see these fish like we did see them. What happened? They didn't quit. We don't even see them here anymore. Let's move the boat out here on this ledge and start down this ledge. And when you move from 10 foot and move over to 25, you're going to find out, well, there they are. What'd they do? And maybe as the sun come up in the middle of the summertime, they was up on that flat feeding early that morning. As the sun come up, they just started to shift from one depth to the other. Does that make sense? Anybody got another, ask another question.
I got a question. Because I don't catfish at all, so I'm kind of curious. With your graphs and stuff like that, I've never really, we fish with a haul. Y'all fish with a pole. So I can go to certain holes and, like you said, hey, last summer I caught one here. Maybe he's there, maybe he's not. So with y'all fishing on bows with the graphs and the new technology, do you pattern fish? So like you and him, so you got 6 rods on the lake right there, you and your partner. So one tournament, you caught 2 here, 2 here. Do you graphically like pinpoint, okay, and that way when you come back to that lake, okay, I caught some here, the pattern was here.
We
You
got-
kind of like.
Yeah,
graph
our
that
our fish pattern the same. So every fish is a cold-blooded species, right? So every fish determines everything he does off of what? Water temperature. So it's the same thing with our fish. The only difference is where a bass, you know, the water temperature gets a little colder, he may push out 100 feet off the bank, and now he's in 10 foot of water where he was in 3, right? Our fish move miles. These fish, they have studies on Wheeler where they tagged fish over 60 pounds. These fish would swim 12 miles just to eat. They'd swim 12 miles to a mussel bed, feed for a couple hours, and they'd turn around and swim 12 miles right back to the same place they started at. So, yes, I honestly think these fish are way smarter than what we give them. I mean, if you look at a fish in a fish tank, he's conditioned, right? He knows when you walk up to that glass, you do anything on the top of that, he thinks he's getting fed, right? Because he's conditioned. I think all fish are the same way. So, but yes, they do pattern.
And the biggest thing, these fish are moving, and you can start to set up something where, you know, I believe, and this is my firm belief, and everyone may think different to me on this, but I think seasonal. I'm a big guy that deals with seasons, you know what I mean? And the reason I say this about season, because it has proved to be fairly true to me. And I believe that in the wintertime, fish have a tendency to be in certain places. In the springtime, fish have a tendency to be in certain places. And fall and winter. Do you see what I mean? So I do have a thing that I keep up with. I just keep a mental note of this, and I keep it in my phone. I'm like, well, I've always done good in this type of water in the wintertime. And I've always done good in this type of water in the summertime. And that's just something I stick with.
That feeds right into my question, because we do well in the winter, we do well in the summer, and we do well in the fall. This temperature change from January until we get to warm water in March, we struggle to find them. Do they typically run, say, the channels, or the side of the channels? We fish just like you fish.
So this is what's happening, and this is the reason I say that we have a tendency, you know, creatures of habit. We want to fish in the same place over and over again. And some seasons, if we are the creatures of habit and we fish in these same places all the time, no matter whether it's winter, summer, spring, or fall, if you'll go back and look, you're going to probably say, and go back over the last 10 years, you're going to say, you know what? I don't never catch anything here in July and August. I always do really good here in February and March. And that doing good in February and March is so embedded into us, we're afraid to even go try anything different in July and August, because this has been so good to us, but yet we don't catch them, and then fish is not there. They done moved somewhere else.
So when they're transitioning, do they transition into channels, or they transition into shallows? Because in the fall, we still find them coming up and down those ledges. But in the spring, early spring, we just struggle to find them.
This time of the year, and you fish the Coosa on the Georgia side, which is really finicky. I mean, that's where I cut my teeth. So over there, you don't have a lot of options to go shallow unless you go down to the lake.
The flats, yeah.
So you got to get up in the creeks, you got to get up in brushy.
Up in the creeks. I live in the transition water of the creek.
Yeah.
And the river.
So my biggest thing is this is what really separated myself from a lot of other anglers is I used to be the same way. I used to, well, I mean, I caught them there last week. Let's go back there. They got to still be there. You know, I wasn't ever looking at why are those fish there? What is making those fish go to that spot? What's keeping them there? And whenever I started breaking it down and really fishing conditions, that's what really opened it up. But that's this time of the year where you have what? A lot of inflow from creeks and other stuff like that. Fish are getting ready to spawn.
Got the catfish running out, the strike running in.
Yep,
the,
yep.
You know, the whites and the crappie are all.
Yep. So
When-
I honestly believe this time of year, if you get up in some of those creeks, that I know you got to go real shallow up in some of them creeks, but fish some of those creeks the same way you fish the river. Fish some of those timber piles. Those fish are up in there staging to spawn.
When we get to this time of the year, what do the fish are doing? What do fish are doing now? Y'all know what they're doing right now? They're getting ready to pre-spawn. And hey, this bait and stuff, when you go crappie fishing, hey, you know there's a certain time these fish are on the bank, don't you? The spawn is controlled by water temperature. They're looking to lay that egg at a certain temperature, a certain place, and you know what? Most of the time, that water temperature is controlled by that depth. And sometimes when the shallower the water is, the warmer that sun can heat. That's why you get in this backwater and you find them crappie on the bank and stuff like that. Why are they there? Well, the water temperature, the sun's out. That right there is where it's warm at. It ain't but 3 foot up in here. A lot easier to warm 3 foot of water up than it is 40 foot of water. So that's where they at. Now, can I tell you what follows the crappie? Them crappie are following bait and stuff like this. Do you know what follows crappie? Bass, shad, brim, and whatever? Them catfish. And when you go where they at, you follow the bait, and I'm telling you, you're going to find out, hey, this is where the fish is at. And just learning them tips and techniques on what to do there. And the next thing, I'm going to stress this, because me and him both fish tournaments. He fishes them way more than I do. I'm going to go back to this idea. I'm going to lay something out you, give you something you're thinking about. Because it was told to me several years ago. We go fishing today, we go out on the lake, and hey, we're going to put it in the Coosa River, and I go up the river, he goes down the river, and everybody just scattered out fishing. Michael Vaughn, he just fishing down here at the boat ramp somewhere, you know? And I come back, and I'm like, man, I didn't get a bite today. And if you ask me, I would tell you, they just didn't bite today. And what I've come to find out, that ain't true. Because when you go to a tournament, we get there, we put in a day, the Cat Masters, around 100 fishermen, best fishermen in the nation that's going to be here pursuing. We put in, somebody said, well, you reckon there'll be any big fish caught today? I'm like, you reckon? Somebody is fixing to not just accidentally catch one big fish. They fixing to catch, somebody's going to catch them today. I don't know whether it's going to be me, but you can go ahead and bet. You go to the scales and you pull the boat out of the, what did you do today? Man, I didn't bite today. Just hang on. Just go over there and walk to where they weigh them at and just sit there and just wait. Because you're like, I didn't even get a bite. And there'll be guys that pull up one boat after another, reaching in a live well and pulling 50 and 60 pounders out. And you was like, I didn't think they bit today. Listen to this. They always bite somewhere. Does that make sense? And the reason I say that, because you go to the tournament, somebody's catching them. The problem is, I think that our location, they wasn't biting where I was at. But evidently they was biting where them guys was at. Now, one of the things that I've seen just in tournament fishing, that we liable to be fishing 20 miles up the river and 10 o'clock and we ain't got a bite. I tell Joey's a guy who fished with me, I said, man, load the anchor, put the anchor up, get the poles up. He said, where you going? I said, 30 miles yonder way. We're going in a total different direction. We done fished 10 miles of this section, this river today, and we ain't got a bite. I said, I'm basically changed total location. I'm going from one extreme to the other. Why was that? I'm like, I'm looking for some new waters, something different, because somebody today is catching them. And if we don't do no better than what we got, we ain't gonna be weighing no fish in when the day's over. We gotta find out where they're biting at. And I wanna tell you, you can probably witness, testify this, that even though you can see them fish in that graph, they just sometimes don't bite.
Sometimes they ain't gonna eat it.
And I'm telling you, you can go 30 miles down the river and pull up and say, there they are, and drop it down, bam. You're like, wow, why was they biting there and not here? Don't ask me, because I don't have a clue. You know what I mean? But I do know that, hey, just because you see them there does not necessarily mean they bite. So sometimes I just take extreme measures and run from one thing, and I'm like, let's just go 20 miles. Or if we've been fishing this depth of water, let's move to something different. Does that make sense? I don't know if you, on the hummingbird, on the graphs on the hummingbird. Now, I'm a big fan of this. I don't know how Aaron feels about this, but I'm a big fan of this. That when I'm out looking for fish, I'm watching where I'm fishing at, especially on the day that we start catching them. And I'm trying to move around this, that, and another. If we went out today and we say, hey, we let's go see if we can find some catfish. Well, I'm gonna go first of all just with this instinct, you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm fixing to go try this. I'm gonna like structure. That's what I like. I'm talking about treetops. And I would really love to have some treetops that was somewhere in this 20 to 30 foot range. That's what I would really, really like. And it was coming off of a flat, bound into some deeper water, and I was sort of right in the halfway mark. I'm like, this is what I really, really like. But after I fish here for a little bit and don't catch something in this 30 foot of range, and I hit this a couple of times, I'm like, we need to move. Let's get up here in a little bit shallower water. They ain't right here. Let's move here either shallower, let's move out here deeper, let's change the whole technique we're doing, because evidently they're not in this section of water that we're focusing on or trying to catch them in. They're not biting here. So I will move from water depth. I like to try to look at that. Once we find out that, hey, we start catching some fish, on my graph it may have, hey, we busted them in 30 foot of water. You know where I'm gonna be fishing at till they quit biting? In that range. And I may even set my graph from 25 to 35 foot or from 28 to 32, and it'll show up a certain color, and wherever that color's at is where my boat's gonna be sitting, that we're gonna be fishing in, because I found out, and if that changes, and I'm like, we gotta move out of this and move somewhere different. Does that make sense? Any other question concerning it?
I just had one question. Between both of y'all, because I've never caught a fish tank, is there one specific, because y'all are fishing on boats, one specific stance that you go to every time that's easier to pull a fish that big in?
What do you mean?
If I was on my boat and I caught a 40-pound fish, I'm in the water. No, I'm serious. If I catch a fish.
No, we have, I mean, we have,
Hey,
this is what takes the blunt force of that. I mean, it's not us. So my girlfriend, we were fishing a Nickajack tournament and talking about making a big run. So the weekend before, I had went up there, never been there a day in my life. Started on the lake end of it. Nickajack's a small lake. It's 50 miles long, right? Started on the lake end of it. We caught numbers down there. Caught one decent fish. It was like 40-something pounds. I had a buddy with me, and he goes, I want to learn how to bump, which is another technique we use in fast water. How you guys fish a pig and jig? It's the same thing, but we're letting line out doing it. Okay, so we're in current, boat is moving really slow in that fast current, and we're letting that line out behind the boat. So he said, I want to learn how to bump. I said, okay, let's put the boat on the trailer, let's run up to Chattanooga, and we'll put in right below Chickamauga. We get over there, and I kind of just get right out in the middle of the river and get the feel of it for him, right? You got it? All right, let's get over here in these rocks. He catches a 61. I catch a 64. I was like, well, okay, we ain't catching no more of them because I'm coming back here on the tournament. So we get out of there, and that day, my girlfriend, we caught, I think we had 90 pounds before we made the run. So I told her, I said, as soon as they turn the current on up there, as soon as they start generating water, we're gonna run all the way up there. We made that 50-mile run, get up there, throw the rods out. There wasn't enough moving water to actually walk baits like that. So we just spot lock, cast them out. And first fish is 50 pounds. So she catches that one. Get the rods back out, get that fish in the live well, let go one of the other ones. And she goes, baby, baby, baby. And I look up, well, get it. I mean, it's a big fish, I can tell. It's just screaming line off, everything. She weighs $110, and that fish was 80 pounds. Fought it all by herself. This is what does the work.
Yeah, and it's really no, I'm gonna tell you this, for any, let me give you a couple of things. Anybody, I'm gonna tell you it's evident that y'all probably fish. Any of y'all hunt? All right, so I'm gonna say this. Y'all ever heard that term buck fever? And that is when a big buck comes out that you've been waiting on, and all of a sudden you go to shaking and you don't know why you're shaking. You get really, really nervous, and man, your heart's beating. And I carry people out, and I know Aaron does too. And I'm telling you, you got to keep yourself calm. You hang into a fish, and this is a fish of a lifetime. I'm gonna give you a couple good pointers. Okay, this is just simple stuff. I was asked this morning. Says, what is the number one key that you would give anybody advice on catching trophy catfish? Very, very simple. Very simple. Couple things, but it's something that you can do. You go and hang out at the boat ramp or the bait shop. The number one thing of people not catching the trophy catfish, he got away. Is that not it? The big one always does what? Gets away. I'm gonna sit here, and I'm not trying to sound arrogant or nothing like that. I'm just telling you, I don't know when the last time I lost a monster catfish. It may happen tomorrow, you got me? But I've put some big ones in the boat, some 90s and 100 pounders. And what happens here? Well, I'll go back and look at this. There's some things I cannot control, but there's some things I can control. I don't know when that monster is going to bite, but I do need to be prepared when he does bite. Does this make sense? So what do? I make sure that I got good tackle. That's what I make sure of. I'm going to tell you one story. I had a guy go off with me fishing about 7 or 8 years ago. I want to catch a monster catfish, Stacey. I want to catch a monster catfish. I've never caught a big one. I want to catch one. He gets to my house, and this was a game changer for me that day, because if you fish with me today, and if you're not what I call a regular fisherman, I'm going to tell you when you show up, just leave your rods and reels in your boat. You're going to fish with my stuff. He gets out. I says, just leave your rods and reels in your boat. No, this is my granddaddy's rod and reels, and I want to catch one with them today. Okay, what are you supposed to say? I'm like, hey, you want to catch one with your granddaddy's rod and reel? Put them in the boat, let's go. The problem was, his desire was to do what? Catch a monster catfish. We sit there. He's got the rod out. I won't never forget it. And I'm telling you, we fish really hard looking for one fish. We're looking for a big fish. Son one smokes it. I'm talking about it smokes it. He reaches and grabbed it, and before he could get through it, the old rod popped up. He reeled it in. I said, what happened? He said, my line broke. I was trying to be patient. Let's retie him. He's sitting there fooling around. The other rod he had just goes over. He reels him a few more minutes. Bam. I looked at him and said, man, when is the last time you had? Well, I hadn't messed with these rods in 5 years. I've been laying out there in my boat. Literally, you could just take the line. I told him, I said, man, I thought you wanted to catch a monster catfish, but you didn't come prepared for it. This is what I told him. I said, just put your stuff up. I just put fresh line. I keep fresh line on. Does it make sense? I keep fresh line on my rod and reels, and I change them. I run mono. I change the line on that reel right there at least 3 times a year. If I hang up more than that, I change it more often than that. You know what else I do? I fish with me and my buddy was fishing. Just a story. We've been smoking them that day. I mean, we had smoked them. I'm talking about catching 30s and 40s and 50s just back to back. We was catching them. We just catching and releasing them, going right back fishing. Moved up there to a spot, and you know what I hadn't done that day? Hadn't been checking my line, because I'm bad about doing just taking my hand. That's all you got to do. Take your hand, run up your line. Take your hand, run up it. If you feel any rough spots on it, hey, just stop right there. Because what do you want to do? Now, if you don't want to catch a trophy catfish, you ain't got to worry about this. But if you're going to want to catch a monster, and that's what most people want to catch. They want to catch a real big one. They want to kill a really big old buck. If you feel that nick in that line, just stop what you're doing, cut the line, put a new leader on it and everything. We out there fishing. I did fish with, I'm going to tell you this. I did fish with 50-pound leader line. I did. Me and Joey Kirby's fishing that day. He smoked it. You hear me? I'm telling you, man, hold that right there. Hold it, put your thumb on the drag. He has it down like this. I'm like, oh my gosh, I reached and get it and pop. I thought, well, I just lost him. I said, come off. He didn't have the hook. I reeled it in. He didn't have the hook because I didn't have a hook because he had it. I don't know about y'all, but the day this quits bothering me, I'll quit fishing. I just sit down. He said, what is it? I said, man, I've been fishing. We've caught some good fish today. I said, but that was that big one. I said, my stomach, I said, I don't feel good. I said, you know what? We done caught too many fish today. And you know what I hadn't done? I hadn't been checking my line. But I also left right that day and I told Joey, I looked at him this way. I said, this won't happen again. I was on my way home after this fishing trip. He calls me. He said, where are you at? I said, I'm in Bass Pro Shop. He said, what are you doing? I said, you know that 50-pound leader line I used to fish with? I said, I got 100 on here now. He said, is that overkill? And I says, it may be. I says, but you know the way I look at it? If this 100-pound takes a nick, it's a little bit better at taking a nick than 50 pounds because my diameter. And so I want to encourage you, keep a check on your stuff. This is stuff that you can do. This is stuff that you can take care of. Yeah, that you keep a check on it. Make sure make sure it ain't flawed. Make sure your hooks is ready. Make sure you got good knots tied. So when you do hook up with this big one, you got your drag set. Y'all got me? Let me go back to this. Y'all got just a few more minutes? I ain't boring you, am I? So just hang on. I want you to grab this right here. So this guy that I started about 5 years ago, wanted to catfish. Now he's in the tournament catfishing. Reel up a little bit more. And don't you set the hook on me. Reel it up a little bit more. Reel it up right to the fine. Hold right there. And so he wanted to start to get into catfishing with rod and reel. And he come in, he told me, he says, my line broke. I said, how'd you do this weekend? My line broke. I'm gonna tell you, when you tell me your line broke, I said, there's no way possible. It just don't happen. There's a couple things that's gotta happen that's out of the ordinary for this line to break. And I will say this, remember this, because if you're having problems with your line breaking time and time again, you're not doing something right. And it's probably not your line, it's probably your knots, very first thing, okay? But I'm fixing to show you something. Pull up on it. Pull it with everything you got. Pull it. Don't hold it, don't hold it.
Oh.
Do you see this? Do you see this? It can't get but so tight. Tighten the drag up a little bit more. It can't get but so tight, then what happens? My drag starts to move. Do you see what I mean? So I would tell people when we fish, is your drag set? And I've got with some guys, hold your hand back on it, don't let it. And I've seen them, I'm like, what, have you got your drag set? He said, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, what you mean you don't know? Because I'm gonna tell you something. When you hook up, it don't have to be a 100-pounder, but when you hook up with a 70-pounder, I'm fixing to tell you what he's fixing to do. He's fixing to test every flaw. Because when you get him up out by the boat, I carry people out fishing. And when we're out fishing, I can tell when they've been this pole over double, they got a big one. And this is their first time fishing. I just want you to hold this in your hand. And they'll be reeling on him, and they get him closer to the boat, and I just ease over by him. And I do this. Because you know what? They ain't never caught a big one. I'm like, we got something on here 50+ pounds. Let me tell you what your tendency is when you lay your eyes on him. He's right there. Pull him to the boat. I done reached around back to drag off a little bit. Because I know if they've never seen one this big, the first thing they want to do is on a fish that's laying forward from here to that chair, and I'm in reach with a dip net, you know what they want to do? Just pull him. I'm like, no. You're going to pull the hook. You talking about a 50 or 60 pound fish. You remember when I told you about that buck fever? That catfish fever got it. I literally had a guy on the boat here. He wanted to catch his personal best. We fished for a day and a half. And one night we was sitting there. We fished the whole day. We was going to fish the next day. I said, just be patient when we come after one fish. This is what you wanted. And I'm telling you, about 9:30 that afternoon, one slammed it. I looked at the guy. I said, you going to get it? He reached up there. I reached up and set the hook and grabbed it. I said, my Lord, it's a big one. And I handed the reel to him. I said, this is him. This is a big one. I don't know how big. Don't know if it's going to be your personal best. His last personal best was with me, which was 40 pounds. But I'm like, I think this is a big one. This fish comes running to the boat. And he just gradually I'm like, hey, I don't look at the tip of the rod. I'm like, reel. Where's have you done lost the fish? He's reeling. And this fish is coming by the boat and goes to pull and drag. Fever got him. It's strip and drag. He reaching and grabbed the line. I'm like, man, let it go. Something's not going to give. This is what this drag is intended for. That once you put so much pressure up on it, it is designed to start slipping then. A lot of people ask me, say, how do you catch these? What size line? I got 40 pound. That's 40 pound mono. I got a 100 pound leader line on it. There's a reason I use this. But if my drag's set, I get out there in my yard. When I line my reels and stuff up, or I get ready to go fish a tournament, I hook my hook somewhere, back off, and I pull on it. Make sure I'm like, this drag is where I want it. I want to make sure there ain't nobody come by and lock this down, that when one slams it, the next thing I hear is the 22 rifle going off that done broke my line. This drag is there for a reason. Anybody got another question? Go ahead.
When you use your planting boards, you say you throw 3 out on one side. Now, would you do that on the Coosa River for catfish?
I've
Yes,
done
sir.
it right here on this river. So up to I'd say about 0.7 current. You get one generator going here. You can do it a little further down. You're not going to do it right here in Gaston. But you get down south side or further down, yeah, you can drag in the middle of the river channel. So another thing too, like when we say we drag an area, we scan that area first. So like when you get down by the dam, up above the dam, and all them timbers fall down, you ain't gonna drag through that. So look at the area you're gonna fish, scan it. There's some areas down in there. Don't get out of the channel and try to drag up there. There's whole trees laying up there. But
Usually you're anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20 feet.
yeah.
Somewhere in there.
Yes, sir. And I always let the current determine if I'm dragging it, because too much current, you're not going to be able to do it. It's just going to wash your stuff up on top of, and you're not going to be able to do that. But when it gets that, I just go back to a different technique. And it seemed like when you're dragging, I stay on GPS. It's according to what time of the year, but a good speed at trolling, I say to start with would be 5.
I start with the first number of the temperature. So if the water temperature is 50, I'm gonna start at 0.5. If the water temperature is 60, I'm gonna start at 0.6.
I've only used planting boards in like Lake Erie.
Walleye fishing,
Yes, sir.
trout fishing stuff. Yeah.
And just troll around,
That's
As
it.
the hotter the summer goes, you can speed up your speed right there. And if you go into the winter time, just slow your boat down, the presentation just slower going to that fish.
It's not necessarily that we go that slow because those fish won't hit it any faster than that. I've caught them at 2 miles an hour before. But the size of weight you have to keep it down moving like that. So like when you guys are walleye fishing up on the Great Lakes, you guys may be in 80 foot of water. You're fishing the top 20 foot of the water or where you're seeing fish. You may be fishing the 30 to 40 foot range, but you guys are moving at 2 miles an hour, 2.5, somewhere in there. So we slow it down, just make sure we can have it in that strike zone that we want to be in.
Yeah. What does she have?
This month and next month in this area, usually every year. A lot of rain, these turbines are wide open for 2 months. So they generally 120.
So you can ask some of these guys in here. Last year, I came and fished a lot of tournaments over here, and I put a whooping on them boys.
He's bragging now, ain't he?
And I'm not bragging, but I started fishing way different than the way a lot of these guys do. Because, I mean, these guys, for 90% of the year, these fish are in this channel here until it blows out like that. And you can still catch fish in the channel here. But the mass majority of fish, they push up in them creeks. I was catching fish out of 2 foot of water.
They're gonna be shallow over here and it's wide open.
Yes. So if you have inflow from creeks, if you have stained water moving in from creeks and the water is not dropping, and that's weird here because of the bend down here, because it'll be rising here and dropping down there. But if you can get an influx of water and not have the elevation dropping really fast, them fish will push up in there. Especially this time of the year with the sun. I was literally or not even spot locking. I was sticking my trolling motor in the mud to hold me in. Yes. Yeah. I usually start about 10 foot, and I'll start dragging and just start working shallow. Yep. Yep.
Let me close that out with this today, and I'm gonna go to this, guys. You go to the bait shop, and I know we'll go back to all these conversations that happens at the bait shop, and you will hear it today if you stop and you got a boat behind your truck, and you at the gas station, and the guy asks you, hey, where you going? So I'm going catfishing. You know what that guy's fixing to tell you? You need to go to that big hole down below the bridge. It's a 100-foot hole. That's where they at.
That's where the divers seen them back in the day.
And that's what, can I tell you, we have landed numerous fish.
I don't have a car.
Over 90 pounds been put in my boat. And every one of them's come not from that big hole. They come from less than 20 foot of water. So that's, I'm not saying they're not in that 100-foot hole. You got me? But don't think that that's the only place that they at. They up in 5 and 6 foot of water. They up in 2 foot of water. A lot of people just don't never fish there for them. But they in a variety of ranges. You just got to find out.
Is it flats and blues or mostly flats?
You can catch some big flats this time of year in shallow water.
Mostly flats.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So the Cat Masters tournament on Wheeler, that morning of the day one, I thought when we pulled up there, I thought we're going to catch a couple 50-pound blues right here. We've seen some bigger ones throughout the week. I caught a 72 earlier that week in the same area. And we pulled up, first rod went down. I mean, he smoked drag. I was like, 50-pound fish. Robert reels him in, and a 36-pound flathead came up next to the boat out of like 5 foot of water. And I'm like, what is he doing here right now? And then I turn around and catch a 54-pound flathead. And I'm like,
Guys, it's about time to wrap it up here. If y'all have any more questions, we'll be at the SmackDown booth. Y'all can come by. Feel free to come by and see us. Hey, God bless y'all, and y'all have a good day today. Appreciate it, bud.
All right, guys. I am just going to leave the feed on. We should have, I believe, Matt Heron coming up here in just a second. Yeah, so we'll have the seminars every hour on the hour, moving through the rest of the day up through the last one is at 5:30. So bunch of bass fishing to come. Hope you got something out of the catfishing discussion. But also a lot of great deals here at the show. So if you're hemming and hawing, get on down here and come see us at the Alabama Fishing Show and Expo. All right, let's get set up for the next seminar. So we'll be back with you in just a few seconds. All right, guys, we are back, and we're getting Matt Heron set up. So I'm gonna flip the camera around, and they'll be rolling here in just a second.
We good? All right, welcome everybody. Saturday morning here, Alabama Fishing Expo. I'm your host, Mike Visco. Coming up, this next guy, I've known him for a long, long time. He's a legend in the bass fishing industry. Won over $2 million fishing tournaments. One of the best guys you'll ever meet. He shares a ton of knowledge that you guys are going to talk about flipping the Coosa River. One of my favorite places to go fish. Matt Heron, everybody.
Good morning. You know, I've spent a lot of years on this old river, and I guess this rod right here probably got me more addicted to bass fishing than anything that I've ever owned. You know, when I grew up as a kid, my dad, you know, we were spinnerbait fishing. That was the deal. Back in the day, we fished this old river and spinnerbait fishing and throwing crankbaits and stuff. That was the deal. But, you know, as we got more fishing pressure and things come along, this technique come off the West Coast. It was called flipping. Or back then, I don't even know what they call it, doodle dabbing, socking, all kind of stuff. There was an old guy out west named D. Thomas. And it was by the time I graduated high school, he was taking the tournament world by storm. And then it kind of transferred over into this part of the country, and a guy you probably heard of named Denny Brower. You know, I was probably 17, 18 years old about the time that Denny was really made it popular, and I got engrossed with it. And I'm kind of the guy that's always had a mentality like a bow hunter. I mean, I bow hunt. When I deer hunted, I like the part of the stealth. I want to be able to get in close to what I'm trying to fish for or kill, and I want to be able to get in his house without him knowing it and be able to present a bait or take him at close range. And that part of the fishing aspect really got to me. And this river was a great place to learn it. And at the time, you know, I'm gonna go into a lot about baits and stuff, but it's not about baits, it's about a mindset. You can flip and pitch anything and everything. You know, on this river, you got riverbanks, you got docks, you got rocks, you got grass, you got gravel bars. It's not about the technique. It's about being able to present the lure and understanding how to get in there close to them. First thing I want to talk to you about is boat control. The most important thing to being successful at flipping and pitching is how you control your boat. If you are a bull in a china shop, you are not going to get close to your prey. It's not going to happen. You want to come in? All right. Got some folks want to come in. You know, one of the things I was fortunate about with my dad, you know, we fished out of an old flat bottom fishing marine. I mean, I'm old. I'm 60 years old, and I run up down this river out here, and how many of y'all know what a fishing marine flat bottom was? Had those seats in the center. You know, for most time we had to sit down. Had old tiller handle 18 Evan Root. I mean, that was big time, man. Had a box Super 60 Humminbird flasher, and that was the deal. But so the beating and the banging in the tin boat taught me a lot. And a long cast, even throwing spinnerbait when my dad was from here to that wall. I mean, we didn't throw far. And so it just kind of translated over into flipping. But the first thing I want to talk to you about is that boat control situation. How many of you, where do y'all normally set your trolling motor at when you're going down the bank? I've seen, you know, I fish for a living. And it's really funny. I'll tell you a story. We was down on the Kissimmee River, and I noticed probably one of the best flippers known in this game is Tommy Biffle. And I'm close enough. Tommy's on one side of the river, and I'm on the other side of the river. And I'm the guy that likes to put my trolling motor on about 30%, 20%, but I never take my foot off of it. So I call it poetry in motion. There's no wasted movement, when I get on a trolling motor, I'm constant, I'm steady. I don't on and off the trolling motor, and I'm going down the bank. Tommy's on the other side, and I can hear him on that Tour Edition motor guide. He's got it on about wide open. and he hit that button. And every time he hit that button and let off, I'd hear 10,000 gallons of water slap up on the front deck of that Ranger. And we're fishing in the tournament. And there was fish on that side and there's fish on my side. And I think I caught about 15 down my side, and I never seen Tommy catch one. Tommy left, and I turned around and went right back up the bank where Tommy come from, and I probably caught 15 more over there. And the whole deal was that water was so clear and so shallow that every time, even as good a guy as he is, he's one of the best there is in the game. When he got going flipping and pitching, there wasn't near as much boat pressure and angling pressure on these fish as there is today. So Tommy'd been out there doing this for 20 years before I come along. So my mindset, Tommy was, for 20 years, he'd been able to put that trolling motor on 10 and go down the bank like a bull in a china shop and gotten away with it. And if you'll look, his tournament stats have started going down and down and down. And it's not because he's not a great fisherman. He's a phenomenal fisherman, won tons, thousands of dollars. But because of my age and the pressure that I had to deal with, and his age and the pressure he had to deal with, our philosophies on how we approach the game is totally different. One of my best friends in the world is Bill Lowen. We travel together. And he is like a stealth cat on a hot tin roof with a trolling motor. No wasted movement, no wasted, no noise. But that is the mindset I want you to have as we go into this. Targets don't matter. Targets are what we talked about before when we're flipping and pitching. It's docks, rocks, whatever's in front of you. You can flip and pitch anything. As long as there is a vertical target, whether it's a rock wall or a gravel bank or a log that runs way out, as long as there's a target there, you can do it. The most important thing, there's two things about this technique that I want to share with you in the limited time we got. Number one, flipping and pitching is nothing more than a pendulum presentation. I'm going to go into baits and stuff and all that in a minute. But there's two ways to do this. I like to use a 7/6 rod. Why? I settled on 1-length rod when I was a kid fishing on this river. Most of you, a lot of you in here is old enough to remember this. How many of you remember telescoping rods? The reason why we had that is a big bass boat back then was, when I started doing this, was like a 17.5-foot Ranger or Procraft or whatever. So we couldn't get these 7/6 rods in a rod locker, one piece. So we used a lot of 610s, 6/8s, and they were telescoping. Well, they were great on this river. I thought it was phenomenal. But the problem you run into is when you're fishing this deep and you're fishing from me to that chair and you pitch over there, you think you're quick, right? If I just pitched to right there. Now, a lot of these bass, you're up so close to them, and when you present it, they catch it on the fly. They're moving when it hit the water. You got a short rod. I'm hung in the constant. You got a short rod. We got a whole bunch. You can't kick up enough line. So what you'll wind up happening when I was using those shorter rods, as soon as that fish ran and I went to set the hook, I couldn't catch up. And I was constantly losing fish. Come on in.
Sorry about that.
Hey, you're great. Y'all coming in? They good? Okay. But settling on their 7/6 rod length was very critical. Most people are very uncomfortable with it. I will never forget the first time that I started trying to flip and pitch with the 7/6 rod. Today it's a lot more common. You got to remember back in the day I started doing this, a 6/6 straight handle rod or a 5/6 pistol grip rod is what we were using. So all of a sudden I got a handle that's 12, 14 inches long. It was like the most awkward, cumbersome thing in the world. You got this big old gorilla rod and you thought that it was easy, but you get all messed up with it. But by using the longer rod, it allows you to very easily pendulum a bait and pitch it to where you want it and take up line on shallow water fish, deep water fish. When it goes down, a lot of vertical presentations. but the rod length overall is 7.6. Another thing that I want you to look for when you go into flipping and pitching, a lot of rod companies, they sell these flipping sticks, and most of them are wrong. I'm gonna say 80% of the flipping sticks that you buy today are not suited for a 5, 10 to 6 foot man. Ain't gonna happen. They sell them with 12-inch handles, 12.5-inch handles, and what winds up happening, you get you a very long handle, and you cannot maneuver this rod. If you pitch over here and a fish runs the wrong way, first thing you're gonna do when you got a belly like mine, you can't get it back. You're stuck. You think you got a big old rod set to hook. No. When you go in to pick out a flipping stick, no matter what model it is, bend your elbow at a 90. You do not want the butt cap to go past the bend of your arm. Main reason for that, like I said, is being able to flip and pitch it. It's very comfortable, being able to set the hook. So when you buy one, no matter what model you like, you can go to Mud Hole or anywhere else. Most of these rods, like on the split grip, you can take a razor blade, a box cutter, cut that back, trim the blank down, measure it off, and what I call, when you measure it from the back of the reel seat to the end of the butt, order you a butt cap, and they'll be anywhere from $8 to $10. Slip it on there, and it's gonna make your day a lot more enjoyable. Next thing is reel ratio. You wanna go 7-3 to 1, 8 to 1. Same deal. These fish, when you're up on them very, very close, very tight quarters, when you make that presentation, a lot of times they hit it on a fly. You've done pitched it into their house and they're gone. If you don't have a fast gear ratio reel, you're not gonna catch up. I like to use 16 to 20 pound fluorocarbon line, sometimes 25. 25 in fluorocarbon is very unmanageable. For years and years and years, and I'll still do it sometimes, we use 25 and 30 pound monofilament. And what happens, mono does not sink at the same rate as fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbon sinks very fast. It has no flotation in it at all. Monofilament is going to take like big bulky jigs and stuff and literally slow the fall down. The next thing, we've kind of gone over the rod, reel, and all this kind of good stuff. We're going to get into port stuff now. Flipping and pitching, 99% of the success rate you're going to experience is fall rate. Do you understand what I'm saying, fall rate? It does not matter what bait you're flipping and pitching. One of the first things I look at, my standard bait presentations is a jig. I probably do 80% of flipping and pitching I do with a jig. I absolutely love it. It's a big, bulky profile. I can take by colors nowadays with skirt colors and all. I can emulate brim, crawfish, bluegill, whatever. You know, I'm standardly going to use 3 color hues. I like blacks and blues. I like green pumpkins, and I like browns. And then the one oddball color is when they're really feeding on shad. I love to flip a white jig. But what I do with the fall rate, whether it's a jig or a creature bait or a lizard, or I'll go into all that in a minute. I call this a swimmy tail. This is actually a reaction innovation spicy beaver. There's a lot of baits that actually grab water and move water, and what it does is I can control the rate of the fall by the size of the swim of that tail. I can take a 5/8 or a 3/4 ounce jig and put a big swimmy tail on it and slow it way down. Or I can take the swimmy tail off and speed it up. There's times that these fish, when you pitch in there, there's 1 or 2 things you're gonna be looking at. You're either trying to keep it in a window that if he's sitting beside a log or a dock or whatever, when you pitch that bait in there on him, the strike's gonna happen in 1 or 2 ways. As the bait starts falling, if he's suspended up off the bottom, they're kind of like crappie. They don't want to go down to it. So you want to slow the fall down. If he's sitting already on the bottom, why do you want to take so long to get down there? And plus, if he's on the bottom and he's inactive, a lot of times a bait that's really, really falling at a high rate of speed and falls on him fast, you'll trigger him. And you'll get a lot of reaction bites. So fall rate's everything. You know, when I flip a lot of soft plastic, whether it's, Lord, I love to flip straight tail worms, I love to flip curly tail worms. When I first started learning to flip, one of the first baits that really got me going, because back when I started trying to learn this technique, we had living rubber jigs in Uncle Josh pork chops. I mean, we didn't have, God, I've been flipping and pitching for years before there was ever a Jean LaRue salt crawl or a big crawl or any kind of crawfish. We didn't have it. But what was amazing, Uncle Josh come out with a I called it a flipping chunk. It looked like a number 11 chunk, had a curly tail off of it, looked like a worm, or we had a crawtail. So the way I got my confidence up in it was there was a local company here in town or down in Birmingham. It's called Red's Plastics. I don't even know if they're still in business anymore. But they made a 6-inch worm. It's called a big flipper. And you could take that big flipper, and in the summertime, you could get bite after bite after bite. And I got more intrigued with that technique and more intrigued with flipping and pitching by using soft plastics. But the biggest thing I learned in doing that was on this river. You know, my standard go-to deal, this is, if I wanted to show you the hook and plastic setup that I have, this is a Reaction Innovation Spicy Beaver. I actually designed this bait for Reaction Innovations. It's probably my #1 go-to bait. It just moves a lot of water. I do a lot of things with this bait. I'll put it on swim jigs, flip it by itself. It just kicks and swims like a bluegill or bait fish. But my standard go-to today, if we was going on this river today, I'm gonna have 20-pound fluorocarbon on. I'm gonna have an owner 3/0 jungle flipping hook, and I'm gonna have a 5/16 tungsten sinker. This one happens to be, I think, a elite tungsten. But what I'm gonna do about the fall rate, you gotta pay attention. Every bite you get flipping and pitching is a clue in the game. If you don't pay attention in flipping and pitching, one bite can take me in a tournament day. I can go for 5 hours and never get a bite, and one bite will turn into 20 pounds. And it's all about every time the bait hits the water, every time I get a bite, I'm trying to figure out, did he hit it as it was falling? Did he hit it on the bottom? Had it laid there a little while? I mean, it's that intricate a detail, and guys that are really good flipping and pitching, they're that detail oriented. This all sounds complicated and hard, but it's not. With the soft plastics that are available today, if I was going to suggest, if you want to learn how to flip and pitch, you know, everybody says get a coffee cup, stand in your garage or stand in a, you know, whatever, flip and pitch to that target. That's true. And that's important. Being comfortable and being accurate flipping and pitching is very important. But having confidence in what you're doing and getting bites, that bite is like reaffirming that what you're doing is right. How many of you fish shaky head? Trick worms. You can flip and pitch shaky head. I do it all the time. I absolutely love it. You're fine. You could take any kind of a straight tail worm, whether it's like a Reaction Innovations machete worm or some kind of a paddle tail worm. In the summertime, go down, just get out here around docks, whatever, and get your flipping stick out and play with shaky head sizes. I'll flip and pitch. There's a lot of companies now that are making shaky heads that are 1/8 ounce all the way up to 5/16 ounce that have 5/0 hooks in them. And the ones I really like are, they got like a little spring screw on them. And you can flip and pitch it, but go out and do that. Pay attention to, you know, flip and pitch, get comfortable doing it. And when you start getting bites, then you can transfer it up to the jigs. A jig is a big fish technique. Guys that win tournaments, most of them, I say most of them, a lot of them do it with a jig. It's a technique. Once upon a time, I could go get 25 bites a day doing it. Anymore, with the fishing pressure and everything that's changed, 10 to 12 bites a day is a good day. But on an average day, a jig, if I got 10 bites on plastic and 10 bites on the jig, my average bite's gonna be somewhere between 1.5 pounds and 2.5 pounds bigger. Just bigger fish like bigger baits. A couple of things I want to go into about this technique before I forget. You know, a lot of times I see the major #1 no-no. Do not do this. You won't last an hour. You'll go home and tell whoever your fishing buddies are and your wife that your back is killing you. My dad was this way for years. He holds his arm straight out. I done got jacked up there. He holds his arm. What I'm trying to tell you is do not do this. Everybody wants to do this. Get comfortable holding this rod. Keep it at a 90. And I literally, when I flip and pitch, flipping is what I just did. Flipping is literally going down the bank with line in your hand, with slack line, and I'm literally pinning the bait, and it's like poetry in motion. I mean, it never stops. I'm going down the bank and I'm dobbing this far apart. And I pull up to a tree or a dock and I may make 30 or 40 flips on it. But it's just literally and I've got the trolling motor on 10, 12, you know, I'm slow. But it's a good steady pace. I'm covering water, and I'm constantly just trying to cover water. Pitching is literally, you see people, they get the bait and they want to do this, right? They want to hold it in their hand, they want to pitch it. That's good. I may do that on the first one, but most of the time, it never enters my hand. I let the weight of the bait, it pendulums. I never stop. And it's presentation as far as when it goes in the water. If you see a ripple off of this bait when it hits the water, you won't see it once or twice out of 50 pitches. But I do it all day long. And I'll stand on the boat like a scarecrow, you know, a scarecrow like I am right now, and I don't move all day long. But it's once you have success with this, it is something that you can't put down. If you kind of got that bow hunting technique, that mentality about you, and you like to seek out trophy fish, bigger fish, and you know, these Coosa River spotted bass are something special anyway. And you know, I don't know how many of you have ever had the privilege of tangling with one of them with about 10 foot of line out, 5-pounder in the current, but you do it one time and you will not ever, it's just amazing. I mean, you think a big old boy like me, 200-pounder with a 7-foot broomstick, that there's no problem to flip him in the boat, and you better have a hold of it because he's gonna pull you out of the boat. It's just something else. But I can go on for hours and hours and hours talking about all the intricate details, but it's all about boat presentation, control the boat speed, control your movement in the boat. Think about, you know, I'm fishing, I'm trying to catch fish from me to that chair right there, a lot of times. And because, especially if I'm flipping, I'm literally, this whole water willow grass on the Coosa, you see a lot of guys that want to pitch that stuff. Most of the time I flip it. Anytime I'm trying to fish anything vertical, water willow stalks that stand straight up. Any kind of reed stands straight up. I literally want to put my bait in that stand-up vegetation or stand-up target, and I want it to fall straight down. And by flipping it, I'm literally picking it up and putting it down, straight up and down. When you make a pitch presentation, most of the time, when you pitch your lure up there, when it lands, it wants to pendulum back to you. So when you start going and when you start seeing your targets, think about that. A stump, if you pitch straight to it, if you're pitching and you pitch straight to a stump, majority of the time, unless you pitch past the stump's here, the bait's gonna fall and it's gonna pendulum back away from the stump. But the fall rate, how many of you when you go fishing consider constantly during the day whether I need to throw an 1/8 ounce sinker, a 3/16 ounce sinker, a 1/4 ounce sinker, a 5/16 ounce sinker? It's huge. How many of you peg your weights? I peg my sinker for one reason. If I'm in dense vegetation or I'm fishing heavy wood or laid, you know, like log jams, and I want to keep my sinker against the plastic, is the only time that I peg my plastic. I do not know what it is, but throughout the years of my fishing, I've learned fishing Texas rig plastic, if you don't have to peg your sinker, do not. It's something about, just like with a reaction innovations beaver or a tube, when you're not pegging and that bait runs down that line, it's like it frees up the bait and it's a more natural swim and fall, or it'll twirl and spin, and you will get 5 times more bites by doing that, just not pegging your plastics. If you have to peg, peg, but if you don't, don't. But it's fall rate, it's bulk, it's all about jigs. You know, this particular jig, they sell them over at Bucks Island. They sell them at just about every Alabama dealer. There he is, that's my signature series jig. This jig is probably 45 years of my life. I was signed up to contract with Dirty Jigs, and the main reason why I done it, I'd been with Santone for years. And the gentleman that owned Dirty Jigs, his name was Kurt Demuth. Brooks owns it now, that's sold out, but he come to me and he knew my son runs Reaction Innovations, and he said, Matt, he said, I want to do something with you. I said, what's that? He said, I've got a hook that Gamakatsu put out. He said, I've seen your jigs. He said, I think with your knowledge and what you do, we can create something special, and we did. This is not a standard one-off hook. It's a Gamakatsu. They call it a no-leg hook. I'll let y'all see it when we get done. It looks like just a standard flat-eye jig, right? But what it is, it comes up and it doesn't have that leg, and what it allows us to do, this thing's got a big old bite. It's got a bite of a 5/0 hook, but it's only the length of a 4/0 hook. We balanced that out and had to do some crazy stuff in the molding of it, but I went to a 5/32 weed guard, which is bigger in most conventional jigs that you buy, but it's softer material. And I think it took us 18 months to create this jig, because every time they would send me a casted mold, they'd send me a version of it, I'd go down here to Canoe Creek and I'd go to about 3 docks. It's the nastiest docks I've ever seen. It's got cross braces and everything you could possibly think of, and throw this thing as far back up under them as I could and try to get it out. And when I finally got to where I could skip and pitch these jigs up under that dock without hanging, we manufactured it. One or two things is going to happen, but 99, I would say if you buy them, if you use this style jig, you're going to have a lot of one-eyed bass in your live well. I don't know why, but the way this thing rotates, when you set the hook, it's coming through one of his eyeballs, which is great. If you're fishing tournaments, he ain't getting off. This will sound crazy to you. I fish 2-size jigs 90% of the time. How many of you have ever fished a 5/8 or a 3/4 ounce jig? My number one go-to on the Coosa River is a 5/8 ounce jig. It's big and it's heavy. Reason being, I cover a lot more water for fishing 5 foot of water. It don't take near as long to hit the bottom. And then number two, I get a lot of reaction bites. You ever play, how many of you got house cat? Well, this will kind of explain flipping and pitching to you in a way that you'll understand. If you ever had a house cat, you played with that house cat with a toy, you always throw the toy to him, the cat always runs over. The first couple of times, cat play with the same toy all the time, once or twice. But after you throw that toy 2 or 3 times, cat quit playing with it. Or you roll it over, throw something over on a string, and you pull it away from him, he'll get it once or twice, he'll finally get to where he ignores it. Well, that's bass on this river. That's bass everywhere we fish. 24/7, all day long, these fish see baits plunking in front of their nose. All day. When you throw a bait in there, they finally get to where they're used to stuff falling on them. And they get to where they ignore it. There's 2 things you need to do. Number one, if you throw that same toy at that cat and you just forget about it, just leave it laying there. Watch him. You'll think he ain't paying no attention to it, because he knows, same old stupid toy. Just leave it laying there. When he thinks you ain't doing anything anymore, twitch it and watch what happens. He might not have chased it for 15 minutes, but after it's been laying there for about 30 seconds, it don't move. If you twitch it, a cat be all over it. Bass, same way. When a bass sees a 3/8 ounce jig on a dock 50 times during the day, everybody goes down, and you don't realize it, but if you took a video and you videoed Neely Henry at every dock on it, during the day, the course of a day, there's probably 50 boats go by the same dock all day. And they get to where they can tell you whether it's a Stanley jig or a dirty jig or what it is. That's a green pumpkin one, that's a brown one, that's a black and blue one. But you do 1 or 2 things to get that bite, because that's what you're trying to do in bass fishing and flipping. The neat thing about this technique is you can trigger a bite when you cannot trigger a bite doing anything else. There's only one other bait that I know of that'll get a reaction strike like flipping a jig, and that is a crankbait, because you can literally wind it into something to deflect it, and you're trying to get a deflection. You can't throw a crankbait up under a dock hardly. You can't flip it in the middle of a tree or flip it in the middle of a grass mat, but you can take a jig or a creature bait and put it in there. And you're trying to put it in there to where he's hiding. But the 2 major no-nos that I see people that flip and pitch goes back to what I'm telling you about the house cat. As soon as most people make a flip, hits the bottom, pick up, hop, reel it in. Flip, hits the bottom, pick up, reel it in. That's great. But when the fish gets conditioned to a bait at a certain speed, falling, you got 1 or 2 choices. You either slow the bait down or you speed the bait up. That's how you get that bite. Number 2, I got a rule. When I pitch and flip, no matter what bait it is, I won't move for 10 seconds. Even though I may not going to be hop it, but one time, I flip it. My deal, the way I kind of taught myself to do it, when you make a presentation with a flipping stick, first thing I'm gonna do is, I'll go, you watch me on video, I pull a line. What am I doing? I'm forcing myself to make sure that bait's on the bottom, and I'm forcing myself to mentally go, is he looking at it? And then I never hop it. I'll pull the slack up to about right there, and I'll quiver that bait. I mean, I just barely quiver it. My last move is I'll pop it. Because you can sit there, and if you gently quiver that bait, you got his attention, and he may not want to bite it, but I call it a slack line pop. It's not with a bunch of, I'll leave slack in the line, but what I'm trying to do is I'm literally trying to make my baits when I'm flipping and pitching go straight up and straight down, no matter what weight it is. And 90% of the bites that I get is on the pop. And most of the great flippers and pitchers that I know of, that's what they're gonna do. I'll try to, but when you flip it over there, all you're trying to do is I'll sit there and you can watch that bait, and when I'm trying to quiver it, I mean, I'm literally, see that line moving, see that bait, you can't see it, but that bait, you can see it in the floor. It's just, I ain't moving it, but see it shaking? That's what it's doing. That line literally makes that bait vibrate. But that next move with that slack in it, when I do that, it literally in the water, it comes up and goes straight back down. And 90% of the bites that I get is gonna be on that one move. But there's all kind of neat stuff about flipping and pitching. I'd love to go on for hours and hours and hours, because I can. I mean, it's, when you tell people, I'm gonna go flipping and pitching, well, that's all you ever do. Yeah, but I flip and pitch everything. I flip and pitch spinnerbaits. I mean, I flip and pitch frogs. I mean, I'll literally go down the bank. How many of you just go down the bank and I'll underhand skip a frog up under bushes and stuff, let it lay there, and all I'm trying to get is a reaction bite. It hits, you ain't got it, wind it in. And I'm covering water. It's just a technique that you can present a bait in a stealthy manner and create and get reaction bites. That's what flipping and pitching is. Being comfortable with the rod and understanding the rod reel line setup, and having the mentality that I've got to be cautious on the boat. No noise, no extra banging and beating. When I'm up there, I mean, I've got 3 hummingbird graphs on the front of my boat. But if I'm up flipping and pitching, doing what I love to do, 2 of them's on standby, 1 of them's on map with sonar turned off. I have no sonar pinging in the boat. Every one of these graphs, I can reach over when I touch a power button, it'll give me a menu option, and I can either power off or go in standby. When I go into standby, it kills all sonar pinging. 90% of the people that go down the bank in front of me never turn their sonar off. Even the guys that I compete against at the level I'm at, they never shut the sonar down. And that, I don't know if you know this or not, but that thing's clicking and pinging. The tick, 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 tick. It's like a gun shooting. And them fish know it. When you're up there and they're spawning in that deep of water, and I promise you, I could pull up there and never touch a trolling motor and just get real still and watch with that sonar pinging, and I can see fish moving. They're getting away from it. We've conditioned the fish. But think about the little subtle things. Kill your sonar, go into standby, stand still on the boat, don't move around, think about your technique, think about your presentations, try to do it quietly, and just go into kind of stealth mode, and it's going to be very, very rewarding. It cost me about 50 years of my life. I've been eat up with it. Y'all got any questions? Baits, line size, type covers? We're good then, y'all. Sir? The biggest thing I see most people make a mistake in is you don't try to pull into the current. It's hard to tell somebody that you got to back down. But I'm just as comfortable going backwards. And what I do is I face my boat into the current, and I literally use the trolling motor speed. I mean, I'll have most time I run my trolling motor with my left foot. And it's just like I constantly, you either hold it, I try to set it to where I can kind of control the speed. Like I'll put it on, if I need to, whatever speed it is, to be able to let me drift backwards at a steady pace. And I'll never take my foot off of it. And when I get around, there's eddy spots and there's laydowns and there's key pieces of cover that you really want to be able to present. I'll tell you a story about that before I forget it. One of the first BASS invitationals I fished was in '94, and I drew a guy from Ohio. He fished the Ohio River. And we were fishing all the way up at Columbus, Georgia. I was fishing, I found fish way up there all the way into Columbus in the river. And we were fishing current. And when it was my half the day, I ran the trolling motor, and he was literally on the front. He was getting to the fish first. I mean, I'm backing him down. He's basically back there on the platform having a good time, right? He never caught one. You know why he didn't catch one? Because I controlled the trolling motor. If there's a log there, I let the boat drill real fast. When I got to where the backside of the log was, I throwed the brakes on. I touched that button and I stopped that boat, and my presentation went right where it was. Because fishing current and flipping the pitching is all about the rate of the drift. Kind of like we're talking about the control, fall. Understanding that you got to put a bait 10 feet up here to get it to here. It's all mathematical, geometry. You got to understand how a bait flows in the current. And most people, and I used to do this myself, is I wanted to use a real heavy bait in swift current. You can't do that, because what you're going to wind up doing is if you're pitching a real heavy jig, you're going to wind up, it's going to be so heavy, it's going to go down in that current, and it's going to get in behind something, you're going to be hung constantly. So what you want to do is you want to go to control the drift of the boat. You want to go to a bait that's going to naturally, just think about something naturally tumbling in the current. You want it to touch the bottom every so often, and most of the time those fish are going to hit it as it's floating, because it's just hard to do. If you go real heavy, which is your natural instinct, you're just going to be hung. But think about, it's like, I call it trout fishing. If you ever waded a creek or tried to trout fish, even for bass or whatever, you watch those fish, how they react in that current, and it's all about getting your bait to do it. But that story I was trying to tell you at Columbus, on my half of the day, I caught him really good. His half of the day, he was determined that, he wasn't putting me on the front of the boat. And finally, I convinced him. I said, well, it's your half the day. That's fine. I didn't want to leave. I said, I'll run the trolling motor. You stay back here. That's great. I beat his teeth in because I was the guy on the trolling motor. He never caught one, and I weighed in 26 pounds. And he never understood that the cat on the trolling motor controlled the drift, and I controlled the presentation, and he took a whooping. But that's one of the things that was learned right here on this river. Understand that you understand what I'm telling you, how you get your bait to tumble? You want it to be able to not get hung. You want to be able to keep bottom contact, but yet not hang. And you want to be able, you can't throw it unless it's an eddy, a little pocket in the riverbank where there's no movement out of there. You have to present it to that wall plug to get it to here. But that's one of the keys. Any other questions?
What kind of swim gig?
Dirty jigs. Yep. I wish I could show you all the ones I'm using, but I can tell you there's something coming. We've got a prototype jig that's coming. It's really going to be good. I either use the no jack if I'm down fishing real heavy stuff. I like a no jack, or I'll just use the regular swim jig if I'm not fishing real heavy stuff. But it's our weed guards, our color selection's really good. Most of the time they're 1/8 inch diameter, and they're kind of a medium bristle. This flipping jig that I use, one of the few jigs manufactured today, I went to the 5/32. But most people try to go to a big diameter, they go too heavy. And when you're looking at any jig, whether it's a swim jig or whether it's a flipping jig, you want a big diameter. What that's going to allow you to do, it keeps it off the point. It kind of covers the point of the hook. But yet you want this jig, this weed guard, to be soft enough that with very little pressure, it bends down. If you go real stiff, what'll happen is when the fish closes his mouth on it, it literally sticks him right in the roof of the mouth, and he won't go ahead and close that mouth all the way, and you'll set the hook, and you'll wind up, you'll see the fish, you'll half stick him, and he comes off. But weed guard, if I could tell anybody anything about selecting jigs, look at the weed guard closely. Make sure when you select a jig that the weed guard angle is laid back on about a 45-degree angle. Comes back angled toward the hook, and it's not straight up. And just take your finger, if you barely can put pressure on it and roll it down to the point of that hook, it's perfect. On weed guards, whether it's swim jig or this one probably comes a 1/4 inch longer than this from the factory when we pour them. I don't trim crazy angles, I never have, but I'll try to keep it to where it comes down to about where the barb of the hook is. You can see I've cut that one. It comes down. Yeah, I cut it off flush. Yeah, because if you cut it at an angle, you wind up with half the weed guard that doesn't get down to where you just don't get the protection of the hook. But that's another good. That's a good question. What else y'all got? Well, I enjoyed it, folks. Thank you for coming. Hope it helped you. Maybe I taught you some, maybe.
You didn't have fishing of the Malarons down on Lake Lake, did you? Malarons, jig.
That's all it is.
All right, guys. Well, that's another one in the books. I am going to shut off the feed. And let's see, we'll have another one coming up at 1 o'clock. I think we've got Coley McGowan coming back talking shallow water fishing from a kayak. He did a great job. Dropped a ton of nuggets, especially if you guys are into fishing in the current. So come back. We'll get live again about 1 o'clock-ish. And yeah, we're keeping going until last one's at 5:30 today. So come on down to the venue in Gadsden and yeah, come check it out. All right.